don't know the thing that you will do that will make the greatest difference. You don't know. You can set goals, and you can come to conferences, which you should, and you can read books, which we all read, and you can do everything you know to do, but at the end of the day, you won't know the thing you've done that makes the greatest difference for good or for evil. And that's kind of frustrating, because as you study leadership and as you read the stories of leaders, they didn't know the significance of what they had done until long after they did it. So as I kind of thought about that and the frustration of that, I came to a passage of scripture that I want us to talk about a little bit. In fact, it's not even a passage, it's really the story. And it's a story, it's actually just 3 verses and an incident that happened in the life of Joshua. And I think this incident that if you've grown up in church or you're a church attender, you're familiar with this story. It's an incident that I think reflects something that has to happen in the heart of every leader who is truly concerned not simply about making a mark or leaving a mark, but leaving or making the mark, listen, that God has designed you and gifted you and left you here to make. We're gonna put a few verses up on the screen in just a minute, but let me give you some context for this amazing little piece of scripture. If you have your notebook, we're on page 12. There's a blank there for you to take some notes. But essentially, here's the context of this story, a little Bible history real quick. In the Old Testament, God's greatest concern for the nation of Israel was that Israel would not forget the Lord their God. You got that, right? I mean, throughout, especially the book of Deuteronomy, God says through Moses, look, when you get into the land, when you have your own homes, when you have plenty to eat, when you have gold and silver and orchards and cattle and herds, when things are going well for you, God would say through Moses to the nation, don't forget the Lord your God. God's greatest concern for the nation, and certainly there are implications for all of us in this regard. God's greatest concern for the nation was that the nation would be so fat and so wealthy and do so well that they would turn their backs on and forget the Lord their God, that over time they would grow less and less dependent on God. Now, this little incident in the life of Joshua happens at a defining moment in the nation of Israel. And here's the context. The nation had gotten into the land, they crossed the Jordan River, they're in the land, you know that story. And interestingly enough, right before the incident I want to read to you, an interesting thing happened, that the manna from heaven stopped coming down in the mornings, and the people had now begun to eat from the produce of the land. In other words, they lost one indication of how dependent they were on God. You know, when we quote, give us this day our daily bread, for the Old Testament Hebrews, that was a literal thing. Every morning they got up and they got their daily bread. And now they would be able to plant and harvest their own crops, and they wouldn't be as aware of their dependence on God. On the other side of this incident, I want to read to you about in just a minute, is the city of Jericho. This would be the moment that Joshua's name would be made great, and he would be a person who was feared. He would become a household name in just a few days, maybe 2 days after the incident I want to read about in just a minute. That Joshua is on the verge of making his mark. That Joshua is on the verge of doing a great thing. That Joshua is on the verge of becoming so famous and so powerful as a leader that he, like the rest of us, is set up to begin to gain independence from God and to lose his dependence on God. And yet the interesting thing is this. When you go to the end of the story and you read the entire story of the life of Joshua, here's what you discover. When he was 110 years old, he addresses the nation, and he addresses the nation as a leader who says, throughout my entire life and throughout my entire leadership, I never lost sight of the fact that I was a leader who was dependent on God every single day.